People versus Burton. Court. This case was decided by the Supreme Court of California in 1971. Issue. The primary issues the court considered was whether armed robbery can be the underlying felony supporting a felony murder conviction, and the court held yes, it can. Facts. The facts of this case were as follows. The defendant, Burton, was involved in an armed robbery and ended up killing someone. He was charged with and convicted of felony murder, with the predicate felony being the armed robbery. Burton appealed, but the appeals court affirmed his conviction. He then appealed again, arguing that the trial judge's jury instruction, which provided that armed robbery could be a predicate felony to felony murder, was erroneous, because overwhelming precedent supports the opposite conclusion. Analysis. The Supreme Court of California ultimately held that armed robbery can be the underlying felony used to support a conviction for felony murder. The court specifically held that armed robbery is not an offense included in fact within the offense of murder, and that despite Burton's argument, allowing it to be used as a predicate felony for purposes of a felony murder conviction would be consistent with established precedent. Both Burton and the court agree that the controlling precedent here was People v. Ireland. People v. Ireland was the Supreme Court of California case, in which a defendant committed assault with a deadly weapon, which resulted in the death of the victim. The court there held that felony murder instruction may not properly be given when it is based upon a felony, which is an integral part of the homicide, in which the evidence produced by the prosecution shows to be an offense included in fact within the offense charged. The court in Ireland reasoned that if all defendants who commit felonious assaults which result in death could be charged with felony murder, the jury could convict countless people of murder without having to prove malice aforethought. And the court held that this is not the intended result of the felony murder charge. Burton argued that assault with a deadly weapon, like in Ireland, and armed robbery, like in his case, were essentially two of the same in terms of felony murder, as they are both integral parts of the deaths that resulted. However, the court disagreed. Instead, the court here held that assault with a deadly weapon and armed robbery are entirely distinguishable, because one commits an assault with a deadly weapon with the intent to commit bodily harm, whereas one commits an armed robbery with the independent felonious purpose of obtaining money by unlawful means. Because Burton committed a crime with an independent felonious purpose than murder, the court was correct to use his armed robbery conviction as the underlying felony for purposes of securing a felony murder conviction. Therefore, his conviction was affirmed. Rule to remember. The underlying felony used to support a felony murder conviction must involve an independent felonious purpose than murder, and because armed robbery is committed with the intent to obtain money by unlawful means, as opposed to the intent to cause bodily harm, it cannot be used as an underlying felony.